incidents, they were also seen as steps which China possibly took, including, for example, renaming of areas before almost every talks that were scheduled, including the recent ones, let's say in Arunachal or in other parts along the borders, Arunachal particular. And these are seen as signals where China is trying to strengthen its case and giving it as positioning itself as fair enough. We are engaging in talks, but at the same time, there are red lines, and these things will not cross. So these signals have been significant. China has consistently been giving this impression that they are not very keen on that. They'll only settle it at their own terms. So negotiations do not happen without give and take. That is possibility. There have been settled principles in terms of not disturbing the settled population. There are enough agreements and arrangements in place. If the countries want to settle the borders, then the talks can move ahead. If it has not moved ahead despite more than 20 rounds of talks, significantly, that's because of the fact that the political backing, the will of the top leaderships have not come, especially from the Chinese side. There is a lot of willingness in India, I believe, to settle the border because this is a very important border. India and China, we also have to understand that there are no major issues except the border. The trade you talked about, yes, trade is an issue, but these issues can be resolved if there is willingness. India imports more than $900 billion of goods and services. Of this, more than $100 billion, the 134 figure that you pointed out, most of it is Chinese imports.
Exactly.
But
and
still,
so I was in fact just reading up on 113 billion we have in terms of trade deficit with China, because that's the amount that we've imported, and India wants to change that around. In fact, Professor Swaran can speak a little more on India-China trade. What exactly are trade verticals? I understand that we import a lot from China rather than export. So how far will this benefit our economy?
There is no doubt almost now 18, 19 years, the trade has become virtually one-sided. There's an enormous, persistent, formidable trade deficit, which is a major irritant in the trade relationship. But it also underlines the fact that India shows commitment to continuously import from China. You just mentioned figure of $113 billion of imports, which raises the deficit to $99 billion between China and India. And if you look at imports that India makes from next 4 countries, they are together less than what India imports from China alone. So it can also be seen as India's commitment in that sense. The imports are not just showcasing India's dependence on China, but it also showcases China's dependence. For example, when China's exports to United States come under question, then India as a destination becomes very significant for the Chinese. So it's in that sense a interdependent relationship. Of course, you also notice that lately in the wake of the Trump tariffs and the whole ratcheting up of relationship with the United States, both Wang Yi and Chinese ambassador in Delhi have both mentioned that China wants to open up markets for Indian commodity exports to China. But as Tilak said, this could be just lip service sentiments, and we have to see whether they reach on the ground. Some of the things which are already happening between India and China in terms of economic relationship is China opening up some of the exports to India which it had withdrawn or restrained, for example, fertilizers or rare earth materials, etc. India is also responding by relaxing visas and so on. And there are going to be, there is already conversation happening in possibility of joint ventures between Indian private companies and Chinese private companies. China, as we know, has several companies which are having leading position globally in terms of being leaders in technology and in supply chains. So if India can start conversing in terms of how to, in fact, the moment Prime Minister Modi came to power, he had started by saying we can perhaps deal with this deficit problem by allowing China to manufacture in India. So there was a point in time when Chinese phones were the top 4 among top 5 popular phones in India. The manufacturing started in India. So similarly, if there are joint ventures and there is a possibility of Indian companies and Chinese companies coming together and manufacturing as part of Make in India for making for the world, etc., as Prime Minister again says many times, there is a possibility to try and find very innovative ways as to how this trade can become little more balanced. And this is partly also because India's manufacturing sector needs enormous focus, and that is what Prime Minister is doing. That we need to strengthen we have a strong services sector, but we also need to have a very strong manufacturing sector so that India's value-added products in that sense can become globally competitive and also can find market access in China. From Chinese side, they have to facilitate market access to Indian exports as well. So it has to be from both sides. But nevertheless, the fact that China very often has been India's largest trading partner cannot be overlooked. It is a significant relationship. In fact, I have always said trade is the strongest and most reliable pillar between India and China, a relationship which sort of sustains itself even during the crisis. So we saw that during last 5 years of enormous border tensions, trade still continued to grow, and we saw it reaching all the way $136 billion. Of course, last 2 years there was a little tapering down. In fact, the last quarter saw India's exports to China growing up by about 20%. So there is an upswing in the entire political mood, and that showcases in all other sectors as well. And I think therefore there is going to be some positive news also as to how we can ensure that joint ventures can start and Indian exports to China can perhaps also begin to grow slowly.
All right, Professor Swaran Singh, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us. And Dr. Tilak, thank you very much. We will slip into a short break. We'll come back. A whole host of things that we are yet to speak on Pakistan and China's relation. Is that a sore point? And how is India going to deal with it? Of course, Prime Minister Modi, part of the SCO summit. What's going to be part of that bilateral talk with Xi Jinping, which will happen in about half an hour's time from now? A lot more that we will discuss with our panelists on board. Stay with us.
You glow different when you're in love. 16 million shades of love to choose from. Unlimited love. B6. Mahindra Electric Origin SUVs.
Best है सर
पर नया क्यों?
Architect जी, something special for you. बिरला ओपस अश्योरेंस देने के लिए।
ऐसा क्या है इसमें?
इसमें है एडवांस्ड क्वालिटी। 1 साल में पेंट को कुछ भी हुआ तो पेंटिंग वापस करके देंगे।
वापस करके देंगे।
वो भी फ्री। क्वालिटी पे इतना कॉन्फिडेंस, इसीलिए बिरला ओपस अश्योरेंस। रजिस्टर करो birlaopus.com पर।
Every brand tells a story. And they are the storytellers. The Sutradhars. They present a brand with band, baja and barat to you. They are the Brandwalas.
Light, camera and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because News9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to News9's pick of the week. Don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because News9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment. So do stay tuned every Saturday and Sunday, 2:30 p.m.
Thanks very much for tuning in to News9. I'm Nabila Jamal. Our marathon coverage on Modi in China. India and China now coming to a better place. Both countries looking to improve relations. And this, of course, comes on the side of Trump tariffs. That's already had a bearing on the Indian economy. Well, we're looking at a lot of developments that's going to be part of the SCO summit. We will be very closely tracking. Let's have a look. Now, the world will be watching as three powerful leaders converge on a single stage in China for the Shanghai Cooperation Summit. Can I do this again? Well, we're looking at both leaders who are coming together to be meeting at the SCO sidelines. In fact, this is Prime Minister Modi's 40-minute chat that he will have with Xi Jinping in about half an hour's time. We will be very closely tracking this. Importantly, Prime Minister Modi, at this point, who's landed in China, will be meeting with Xi Jinping today. Yesterday, it was Xi who organized all that celebratory images that we invite and welcome Prime Minister Modi as soon as he landed. He landed after 7 years. Prime Minister Modi's visit in China is after 7 long years. The last time he was in the country was in 2018. The visit, of course, is very significant for India-China diplomacy, aiming to rebuild and stabilize bilateral relations. Of course, Prime Minister Modi there meeting with all his fans, Indians who came together to watch him, get a glimpse of him, wave and meet him, greet him. Prime Minister Modi given a rousing welcome there at his hotel and at the airport. He arrived in Tianjin amid chants of Vande Mataram. Supporters there lining up to greet him with waving flags and cheers. This visit in Tianjin is for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO summit, Eurasian Political Security Alliance that includes Russia as well. So we know that India, China, Russia, all on that one platform is certainly going to make Trump jittery. Modi's trip comes at a time when India's relationship with the US is experiencing its most significant crisis in years, following President Donald Trump's imposition of the highest tariffs among Asian countries on Indian imports for New Delhi's continued purchase of Russian oil. Now, China-India, its relations, which had deteriorated earlier with a military clash along the Himalayan border in 2020, are now seeing signs of thawing. So what's likely to be discussed? Border de-escalation and stability. Leaders are likely to discuss progress and further measures related to de-escalation along the line of actual control in Ladakh, including patrolling arrangements and maintaining peace and tranquility at the border to avoid future conflicts. Trade and economic cooperation. Both sides may explore ways to enhance trade relations, secure better market access for Indian goods, and discuss Chinese investments in non-strategic sectors of India. Now, regional security and counter-terrorism. Modi is expected to reiterate India's stance against cross-border terrorism, particularly in context of recent conflicts involving Pakistan, which is closely aligned with China. Now, discussions may also go into security cooperation within that very SCO framework. Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, has also arrived in Tianjin, China, where he will be taking part in this Shanghai Cooperation. Grand welcome that he got. In fact, on one hand, we are also showing you Putin arriving into China. And on the left, you see of your screens, Prime Minister Modi receiving such a grand welcome where you had all forms of culture, art, an exhibitory welcome there, certainly for the Prime Minister. You had LED lights in the night sky welcoming Prime Minister Modi in China. The best possible welcome that Modi received. He's come in after 7 years and this was grand enough. In fact, the visuals were telling. As soon as he landed in Tianjin, we saw a huge red carpet that was laid out. Many lovely children who danced to Indian tunes welcoming him. And then there was a lot of music and performances all the way till his hotel to greet him. Here you have people there lining up to shake hands with him, meet and greet. And so it's very significant to see all three players, very significant players on the same platform, China, India, and Russia. These are images, of course, from the last few hours. In fact, yesterday when Modi landed, this was the greet and welcome he got from Indians by and large, but also China really did pull all stops to ensure this was a real colorful and grand welcome. You see there on our screens a huge red carpet that was rolled out with huge performances. Quite a colorful sight it was. The two leaders coming together after 7 years. Remember, US tariff has really weighed heavy on India, and India at this point looking to its neighbors to expand trade. After the United States, China is the second largest trading partner with India, and it had stopped, or at least come to a near stop for the last few years after China violated border protocols. And now at this point, we're looking at India-China coming together, making amends to their relationship. And of course, both countries now going to be exploring bilateral ties and trade. There was a clear message from both ends that trade will open up, flights will open up, visas will be given. All of that was halted post the 2020 Galwan clashes. So now it seems like that has been put behind, and the two countries have moved forward to come to one table and speak business. Both countries are facing tariff. Remember, you have also China, who has 30% tariffs that they've got to live up to their bargain. Now, India has 50, so certainly it's steep for India. But China, knowing very well, it's also still in a vulnerable state. It's not about tariffs alone for China. It's also about the United States forming a quad grouping, ensuring that China doesn't grow in strength, and there is a counterweight to China. And that was India. So he knows, so Xi Jinping knowing very well that this is a vulnerable place that he's in. China is not favored, at least by the West. So keeping good relations with India at this point is primary for him as well. Let me cut across to our panelists joining us to give us a little glimpse. We have Professor Swaran Singh, Center for International Politics, JNU, joining us. Thank you very much, sir. We also have Dr. Tilak Jha, China expert and Associate Professor, Bennett University, and Manju Seth, who will also be joining us, former Indian diplomat. Let me begin with Dr. Tilak Jha. Your take on, as your China expert, your take on China inviting Prime Minister Modi to the SCO summit and laying out this whole red carpet. Never imagined that's the celebratory mood, all to see Prime Minister Modi. Of course, India-China relations looking far better place than it ever was 7 years ago. But from whatever conversation I've had with diplomats, they've often said, can never trust China. What's your view here? How far should we build this friendship?
I think we have to be very, very careful as far as ties with China is concerned. The word caution has often defined India's ties with China since very early years, and I think that still remains the watchword.
Yeah.
We also have to be careful about how these two countries are sort of positioning these talks. For China, this is the way Indian Foreign Ministry has argued that for China, this is an SCO summit. It's a multilateral summit in which Prime Minister Modi is going. And that way, it's not really a major, the term major is not something that India has officially used. And that is significant here because I think when I say the word caution, we have to be careful that the two talks which have happened between President Xi and that is going to happen today for 40 minutes, roughly, that's a slot that has been booked for meeting between Modi and Xi. These two talks have happened on the sidelines of a multilateral summit. So that is there, and of course there are some.
You're saying it's not a one-on-one talk. It's not an exclusive meet. It's part of a bilateral summit, which India has very much been part of. It has been part of the SCO, but it's been 7 years that India wasn't present physically and hasn't really shown any support to China. So this is new in that sense.
It is definitely new in that sense, of course, because it signals the fact that we are we are putting the hatchet of Galwan incident behind. But I think at the same time, disengagement has happened on the border. But still, there are troops deployed on both sides. They are not in eyeball to eyeball situation, but that is a major key concern for India, on which progress is yet to happen significantly. So that is also there. I think we have also seen very significantly that despite the Prime Minister Modi's meeting with President Xi last October in Kazan, in May this year, when this Operation Sindoor happened, China was very actively supporting Pakistan, providing satellite imageries and weapons. So I think the trust that we are talking about, all these red carpets leave behind, but the fact is that there remains very significant strategic trust gap between these two countries, and that thing hasn't vanished. We have an issue with America today, and I think that is acting as a stimulant of sorts. But the modality of India's dealing with different countries, for example, there were issues between India and Canada. So the way India dealt with that issue, and with what is happening with China, for that matter, since the Galwan incident, and now this shift that we are seeing. So India is talking from a position of a strength with every country. It is saying that we are not a pushover. This is not something like that you treat us as a second-rate power. We are a major country, and we will behave responsibly, but we also expect responsibility from your side. So I think this is the framework in which India is dealing with America. In Prime Minister, we have the headlines that you said itself says it a lot. Trump is not coming for the Quad to India. Putin is coming to India in December. This announcement has come, and President Modi is in Beijing. So it says a lot, but at the same time, it's India's terms that's going to be the key determinant, and today's India is very, very assertive about that.
Yeah, and we've seen that, but what do we do with our economy? How do we stabilize that? They've got to be alternatives. We've got to also be realistic at that, in that sense, right? Let's also bring in Professor Swaran Singh. Sir, we're looking at India-China's relationship finally coming to a better place. Prime Minister Modi is going to be holding a 40-minute talk with Xi Jinping. It's not unusual. He's part of a multilateral summit, the SCO. He's going to be meeting with the host leader. He will have a bilateral meet there. It's not unusual for that to happen. But considering the circumstances where Trump has imposed 50% tariff, the situation has become complicated for India economically. How important and significant will this bilateral talk with China be?
I think for us in India, this is the most important conversation that is happening during Prime Minister's visit to China. Of course, he's also likely to have meetings with other leaders. I assume he's meeting the leader from Myanmar. Then, of course, most important other meeting is the trilateral between President Putin, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister. And of course, the renewed enthusiasm of India, which is witnessed in Prime Minister personally attending Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which becomes an interesting forum given President Trump's sort of blitzkrieg of tariffs against one and all. Second, you raised issue, and it is often raised about trust and distrust between India and China relations. I cannot see any relationship where there is not an issue of trust and distrust. We are witnessing what is happening in India-United States relations right now. President Trump has just announced that he is not going to come to Quad Summit hosted by India this year. So he's constantly ratcheting it up. What we are saying is degrees of trust and distrust that is increasingly fluctuating. And in case of China and India, there's a clear turn after Kazan meeting of Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping as on the sidelines of BRICS Summit. And now they are meeting on the sidelines of SCO Summit. And that happened way before Trump even came into the picture. So it's a standalone, independent process where China and India, for many reasons, Trump could be one of the reasons, have decided that they need to really work on their irritations and start a new chapter of CBMs. The most recent, of course, was the special representatives talks. 24th round in Delhi between Wang Yi and Ajit Doval, where they agreed on 10-point consensus. as to how they wish to take that relationship forward. And in that sense, I think it's a very significant meeting that the two leaders have agreed to dedicate 40 minutes, and they could go beyond 40 minutes to spend time on talking about bilateral relations. Of course, their conversation, given their stature, will also be on regional and global issues. So some of that will be reflected in Shanghai Cooperation Organization final declaration also. But there are several specifics which are already on the table, and how to take them forward. That is where, when officials are constantly working and they are basically cutting the T's and dotting the I's, but strategic direction comes from national leaders. And their 40 minutes together, I think, holds significance for India-China relationship, and it will showcase in what direction, in what case, which initiatives will move forward faster. And they are already talking of the next stage of relationship. Their body language will tell us whether it is a reset or it is an incremental change. But some of the concrete issues like setting demarcation working group, for instance, never in history this was spoken of. We are only talking about peace and tranquility on the border. Demarcation happened partly in terms of conversation during Vajpayee's time, and Jaswant Singh was leading that conversation at that time. But they are now talking among 10-point consensus to think of a demarcation experts group, river water sharing expert group, how to take that conversation forward. So some of that are issues. I think right now trade will be on their mind. So strategic materials like rare earth materials, magnets, etc., are already being facilitated from China to India. Fertilizers have opened up from China to India. Similarly, India is opening up visas not only to the technical staff, but also to managerial staff coming from China. So there are going to be several specifics. I think flights are going to be one issue. Before we moved into pandemic, remember, there used to be 539 scheduled flights every month. And that involved 371 by Chinese carriers and 168 by Indian carriers. And 9 major routes were working directly between India and China. Delhi was directly connected between Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Kunming. Mumbai was connected to Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Chengdu. Kolkata was connected to Kunming. And that has been a huge problem because every time people have to travel to each other's country, they have to either go through Bangkok or Hong Kong or Singapore sometimes. And there is an enormous anticipation that the direct flights is something that could be revived again as they meet. But there could be also focus on border, which is where Telek also just mentioned. There's a process of de-escalation. Even on that, you hear the Chinese voices are today talking of, quote unquote, early harvest, which would include specifics. I think they're already talking of opening border trade, for example, at Shipkila, Lipu Lake, and Nathula. And in that sense, making border atmospherics relatively more normal. And India always says nothing is normal until borders are not normalized. So in that sense, some of those issues which are creating irritations on the border or making it difficult to de-escalate on the border. See, after disengagement from forward areas, they have to now focus on how to move back some of the semi-quasi-permanent structures or heavy equipment taken forward, etc. And the whole set of new confidence-building measures which need to be built in because China and India are no longer the same as they were in 1988 when the chapter of peace and tranquility started and a dozen conventions and arrangements, etc., were made as to how to maintain peace on the border. We are today talking of whole new set of arrangements that need to be made. So in that sense, I think when you look at the larger picture, that is where the meeting of national leaders becomes significant. And we are going to see some body language, some language, some specific.
My question on China and India having 24th round of talks on border de-escalation. If Dr. Tilak Jha could step in on that. On the 24th round, we believe a 10-point consensus was established between India and China's military, and they finally decided that further talks will go forward through diplomatic channels. Could you give us a little sense on what India and China has decided on ensuring that there's no breach within the borders? China has been bullish, and they've largely been the bullies and haven't lived up to their bargain so long. You said we've got to take this with a pinch of salt, can't entirely trust them. Why do you say that? When you say 10-point consensus, what entails in that?
Well, I think the 10-point, as Professor Swansing also pointed out, essentially it's about sort of looking at the border in a way so that the solutions are found. And they have formed an expert level mechanism in terms of early harvest, as Professor Singh also pointed out. And that early harvest thing is how it translates into actual result is yet to be seen, but there have also other mechanisms which have been put in, is that a general level mechanism, which is basically the talks between the local commanders at that level to avoid any conflict. This has been a mechanism which was there between in Western sector. Now they have said that this has to be a mechanism which has to be put in place in the central and the eastern sectors as well. So that seems definitely a step ahead. The most important factor, of course, is that this delimitation issue of the border is something that has not really moved ahead, primarily, I would say, in recent years because of signs that China is not very keen on settling the border. It wants to keep it live. It wants possibly to continue to be in a position where it talks in a position of a strength. And the Doklam incident and the Galwan incidents, they were also seen as steps which China possibly took, including, for example, renaming of areas before almost every talks that were scheduled, including the recent ones, let's say in Arunachal or in other parts along the borders, Arunachal particular. And these are seen as signals where China is trying to strengthen its case and giving it as positioning itself as fair enough. We are engaging in talks, but at the same time there are deadlines, and these things will not cross. So these signals have been significant. China has consistently been giving this impression that they are not very keen on that. They'll only settle it at their own terms. So negotiations do not happen without give and take. That is possibility. There have been settled principles in terms of not disturbing the settled population. There are enough agreements and arrangements in place. If the countries want to settle the borders, then the talks can move ahead. If it has not moved ahead despite more than 20 rounds of talks, significantly, that's because of the fact that the political backing, the will of the top leaderships have not come, especially from the Chinese side. There is a lot of willingness in India, I believe, to settle the border because this is a very important border. India and China, we also have to understand that there are no major issues except the border. The trade you talked about, yes, trade is an issue, but these issues can be resolved if there is willingness. India imports more than $900 billion of goods and services. Of this, more than $100 billion, the 134 figure that you pointed out, most of it is Chinese imports.
Exactly.
But
and
still,
so I was in fact just reading up on 113 billion we have in terms of trade deficit with China, because that's the amount that we've imported, and India wants to change that around. In fact, Professor Swaran can speak a little more on India-China trade. What exactly are trade verticals? I understand that we import a lot from China rather than export. So how far will this benefit our economy?
There is no doubt. Almost now 18, 19 years, the trade has become virtually one-sided. There's an enormous, persistent, formidable trade deficit, which is a major irritant in the trade relationship. But it also underlines the fact that India shows commitment to continuously import from China. You just mentioned figure of $113 billion of imports, which raises the deficit to $99 billion between China and India. And if you look at imports that India makes from next 4 countries, they are together less than what India imports from China alone.
Light, camera, and action. Kick back, relax, grab your favorite snack because News9 is here with your weekend dose of entertainment. It's time to take a deeper dive into the buzzworthy happenings of the entertainment world. From celebrity gossips to exclusive conversations, from nostalgic moments to News9's pick of the week, don't worry, we've got you covered here. And I hope you've grabbed your popcorn by now because News9's page 3 is here to serve you everything that we call entertainment. So do stay tuned every Saturday and Sunday, 2:30 p.m.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News9, English news as it should be.
Thanks very much for tuning into News9. I'm Nabila Jamal. Our marathon coverage on Prime Minister Modi currently in China. The two countries coming together in the face of adversities, Trump tariffs pushing the two neighbors on one platform. As part of the SCO summit, Modi will be meeting. They will hold for 40 minutes. Anytime now. We will take you through all of that coming in live. The headlines first. Prime Minister Modi in Tianjin for SCO summit. All eyes on Prime Minister Modi's meet with Xi Jinping during his first China visit in 7 years. The world watches closely as SCO summit kicks off in China, looks forward to deliberations and meetings with world leaders. Tianjin summit to unite top leaders from Central, South, West and Southeast Asia. Importantly, India, China, Russia on one platform. Ahead of SCO summit, Ukrainian President Zelensky dials Prime Minister Modi, says India has agreed to deliver appropriate signal to Russia. Amid India's tariff tussle with the United States, reports suggest Trump no longer plans to visit India for Quad summit later this year. US President Donald Trump, in a post on Truth Social, announces executive order for mandatory voter ID, says no mail-in voting except for Sikh and overseas military voters. The head of Yemen's Houthi government and a number of ministers killed in Israeli strike on Sana'a. India completes its most successful Asian shooting championships with 99 medals, including 50 gold. Ankur Mittal clinches double trap gold with a world record on the final. All right, India and China on one platform. In a little while from now, Prime Minister Modi will be meeting with Xi Jinping. Well, it does not mean that all is well with China, but certainly the two countries are now open to dialogue. We're going to take you through all that's coming in from Tianjin. Eyes now set on the port city of China, Tianjin, where the stage has been set for the SCO summit, one of China's biggest diplomatic gatherings that's happening this year, where leaders from across 20 countries and heads of 10 international organizations have arrived in Tianjin for this summit, including Prime Minister Modi. But what will really stand out here is the eagerly awaited bilateral meet between the two world powers. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi to be meeting in a 40-minute bilateral chat. Now, what's going to be discussed, that time will tell. Prime Minister Modi, but has a whole host of things that he's currently looking into, with the United States imposing 50% tariffs. Modi is looking at expanding trade and pushing supply chains into other countries, finding other avenues. So there's a lot for India to be discussing here, certainly. But how far will that talk go with Xi Jinping? We've got to wait and watch. He is in China after 7 years, and look at the grand welcome that he's received. Prime Minister Modi garlanded by Indians who are in China. In fact, he received a huge red carpet welcome soon as he arrived at the airport in Tianjin. This visit holds a lot of significance. India-China diplomacy, both nations looking to rebuild and stabilize bilateral relations. Now, you see on your screens there, Prime Minister Modi meeting and greeting with the Indian diaspora like he always does. Amid chants of Vande Bharat and Bharat Mata Ki Jai, supporters greeted him with waving flags, cheers, trying to shake his hand. They came in all the way to his hotel and some at the airport as well to get one glimpse of him. China rolled out that full red carpet for Prime Minister Modi. You saw at the airport, if he could show you the airport visuals as well. Quite a grand welcome. Of course, the dragon colors of red and white. The ceremonial welcome was marked by traditional performances by Chinese artists. Now, this is Prime Minister Modi, who is part of the SCO summit. He's there for this multilateral summit. And on the sidelines of that, there will be a bilateral chat with Xi Jinping. The most crucial one will be between Modi and Xi. Of course, Putin also present there. So the optics of it is certainly huge. A massive statement in itself with India, China and Russia coming together on one platform. A big threat certainly to the West. It's for the West to really see and absorb. Trump, of course, trying to push India to the edge with its 50% tariffs, but India hasn't buckled. India looking strong in terms of its GDP growth. We're on track, in fact, far beyond what was projected. And India now looking to quickly look at other avenues to push supply chains. If not for the United States, where else? India and China trade big, and they have been the second largest trading partner after United States for India is China. But unfortunately, there's also a trade deficit with China because there's largely imports that we do with China more than exports. So that's something that India wants to change, and consciously so. So this meeting with Xi Jinping today will be hugely significant. Remember, we're looking at world leaders from across Southeast Asian countries who are all on that very platform. Officials say Modi and Xi's talks are expected to be covering a broad spectrum, ranging from trade, regional security, border stability, cooperation with multilateral platforms. And do remember that our border tensions with China at this point is status quo. It's not as if everything is solved. It's not as if the two have fully decided on or come to a consensus on the 10 pointers that were established. It's to go forward. Two countries will have to hold multiple more meetings to finally establish and come to one platform when it comes to border ties. But 10-point consensus has been established, but that has to be sealed, and that likely will happen post this meet today. So on all levels, we are looking at the two countries now coming together, open to dialogue. They've agreed to have discussions and establish peace at this point. It has never looked better. India-China relationship hasn't looked better. Today, yesterday, the kind of celebration that China put out to welcome Prime Minister Modi, it's in itself should say that China is really hoping to establish strong ties with the country, with our country. Now, let me quickly cut across to our panelists who are joining us to give us a little. Manish Chand, CEO, Center for Global India Insights, joins me live. We also have Dr. B.R. Deepak, sinologist and Professor of Chinese Studies, JNU. Collins Chong, we also have a global security and foreign strategy analyst joining us. Thank you, Collins. And Patikrit Payen, who's a foreign affairs and geopolitical expert. I really appreciate all of you taking your time out right this morning to come here. If I can bring in Dr. B.R. Deepak to give us a little more right into India-China trade that India is looking to establish, and so is China. We hear that as much as Trump has imposed tariffs on India, we're trying to absorb that shock by pushing our supply chains into other countries. India-China that way has so far had great trade ties until it stopped a few years ago, but largely with India importing and not exporting to China. There is a trade deficit with China. So how can India really turn that around? How significant is this meeting with Xi Jinping today on the sidelines of Trump tariff?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think the meeting today is extremely important, for various reasons. One, of course, given the background of this meeting, is extremely important, and India has been slapped 50% of the tariffs, and almost our trade with the United States in certain But of course, there are other sectors which are not subjected to this tariff. But I think this calibrated, cautious, incremental rapprochement with China, it is a good sign for India-China relations, because being very good, historical cousinhood they had for 2 millennia, that somehow we have not seen in recent time. I think it was visible during the period of equilibrium, which I call it. But then in the period of disequilibrium, this is a very, very difficult task for both. There are a number of reasons why it has been a difficult task, because China primarily is an exporting country, whereas India is a potential market for Chinese goods. And if you see the combined trade volume of Russia and China with us, it's much less than what we have with the United States. And so therefore, United States still remains, very, very important trading partner for us. And I think a possible deal in the near future would perhaps, put it back on the track. But as far as China and India are concerned and how we are going to benefit from this meeting, yes, India is a big market, and if Chinese investment happens, which unfortunately has not happened so far, because we have hardly $5 billion of Chinese accumulated investment in India, primarily because of the problems we have during the Gulf War and later on. But this reset, I would say, it is extremely important. And if the signals are emitted from today's summit that there is going to be, realignment of forces, and Chinese would commit to investment in certain sectors which we would be willing to welcome, and it would be a great beginning. The way you see Prime Minister Modi and the Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, they announced from Beijing that almost $68 billion would be invested in Indian market. And similar kind of statement, if emanates from China, it would be a wonderful deal. But I am a little cautious, given our trust deficit with China. I think that kind of big statement would not happen. But yes, I think China would be, giving the signals that by way of its, various initiatives, be it the Belt and Road Initiative, though we have differences there, or the Global Development Initiative, or, various, even including the Civilizational Initiative. So through these, there is a room for India and China to collaborate, and perhaps, it will augur well for both the Asian giants to have some synergies, and it would also be better for India to diversify its markets.
Certain amount of progress is expected, certainly, but a friendship. Manish Chand, CEO, Center for Global India Insights, if you can step in on India-China friendship, could we really have a strong bond? It's not like we haven't. We had until the 60s, and post which it seemed like India, decided not to trust China, and ever since the relationship in a way deteriorated, but not so much so. Can we rebuild that friendship? Can we be as friendly with China as we are with the United States?
Well, that's asking too much. Comparison with the US is, with India and the United States, you have very robust people-to-people contacts, largely because of the large diaspora and all that. But just to now come back to China, India, when we talk about friendship and civilizational and cultural connections dating back to, centuries ago, if we can go back, and Buddhism and all of that has provided a certain base, in terms of value systems, the value family-oriented ethics, and they also people, innate qualities of, Chinese, hardworking, family-oriented, and all that provides a very good basis for forging friendship. And also, I think, mutual admiration. So, what we are going to be seeing now, and in this regard, political and diplomatic initiatives have an important role to play because what has happened now for the past 5 years till the thaw started in Kazan was a border issue.
Yeah.
The Ladakh issue. When the border is disturbed, it fuels trust deficit. People start asking, can we trust China and all that? But on the level of people to people, I think we can certainly enhance the arc of understanding, stronger people to people and cultural ties. And in this regard, there will be an important development in Tianjin today. I expect that there was a mechanism that was set up after the famous informal summit in Wuhan in 2018, which is, the mechanism for people to people and cultural exchanges. It had 2 meetings and it had been lying dormant for the past since 2019. Under this, there was an India-China Media Forum dialogue. I was a part of this. India-China think tank is a part of it. That is lying dormant. And now it looks like it is going to be revived and we can expect a formal announcement after the talks. And it will hold a meeting soon. But there are multiple, as you saw, this time around, the kind of welcome Prime Minister Modi has got in Tianjin. And when he came to the hotel, all the Chinese women...
it was such a red carpet rollout, but China is known to do that. When they show love, they shower love.
Right. So they are very good. They launch a charm offensive of sort. But it was very charming, atmospheric. Sarod, sitar, and Kathak, and Chinese women and all.
Was it expected? Did we expect this?
Yeah, it was of course planned. It was planned, but of course, everything is choreographed in these visits.
No, absolutely. My question is, did we expect such a grand welcome? And is it only for Prime Minister Modi? Are we looking at all leaders? Even Putin gets a big show?
No, I think with Prime Minister Modi, because we are tracking more closely. But, we have...
No, but honestly, I didn't see all that dance and drama when Putin arrived.
Yeah. No drama. We are a nation who loves drama and color. So I guess Chinese know that. And they did all that. But the important thing is this cultural and people-to-people contacts are going to get stronger. The flights are going to be resumed, direct flights. Visa regime will be eased. Think tank academic exchanges. Because the fundamental problem when you talk about friendship is that we are not talking enough. Chinese talk about the elephant and the dragon tango. But how do you tango if you don't talk enough? You just can't go and ask for a dance.
No, either way, this is the first meet after 7 years. And even when they did meet in Russia last year, it was just a brief exchange. And I think from here on, things should improve and drastically improve. Collins Chong Yu Keat, thank you very much. I apologize if I've misspelled your name. But Collins, your take on what China is looking for from India. We know what India is looking from China. Why don't you give us a sense on what China is looking on what kind of relation they want to establish with India?
Thank you. Good morning, Nabila, and all my fellow friends. We've seen, by Modi showing up in Tianjin is much more of a calibrated hedge. It's not a pivot to me. It's much more of a response to Trump and Washington to send a message to Washington and the others that, India has strategic autonomy and is very much aligned to its non-alignment policy, has very much flexibility in terms of how, India would like to conduct its foreign policy, also as a response to the tariff measure. So he's testing a tactical play with Beijing, while signaling to Washington that India won't be boxed in by this tariff coercion. So it's a control reset, but on India's terms. And of course, being the first visit in 7 years, a lot of expectations, but I don't see, big deliverables. We have seen how the trust deficit is widening for the past couple of years now. And, largely it will be much more confined to areas of low politics, I would say. And I would think that, of course, Prime Minister Modi is very strategic. He has a lot of foresight in terms of how to compartmentalize things and to differentiate things on how India will get, this return from China in terms of trade, in terms of, market opening, in terms of, technologies and all that, as compared to, forging closer ties in terms of areas of high politics, including defense and security. So the wariness the concerns and being cautious are all part of the game. And of course, also we don't see how India will send a very wrong message also to Washington and to Trump. And US is still the most important partner to India in all areas of important aspects of Indian security, especially in terms of not only in terms of economic and technological and supply chain aspects, but also especially in terms of defense and security. So by stopping over in Japan, we can see that it's a very strong message also to reassure allies, to reassure Quad partners that this presence in Tianjin, this presence in the SCO summit is not a deliberate pivot to China. And of course, China uses this as a very strategic leverage to send a very strong message also to Washington that this is a period where China is expanding its defense and economic friend-shoring efforts. And now that China has been getting more friends, apart from its measures in Southeast Asia, in different parts of the world, but the most important partner now to be able to get alongside with China now, of course, to court India in this aspect. So it's a very much strategic move by China. And of course also to capitalize on this, to seize upon this new opening by what Trump has been doing now, and to use the tariff measure as a very important aspect to amplify its defense and economic friend-shoring efforts.
It's a sheer business relation. It's not going to be beyond that. India-China is only looking at expanding business, and in terms of friendship, I highly doubt it's going to go beyond that, considering that China is great with Pakistan, has supplied nearly 63% of Pakistan's arms. We've just entered into a near-war situation with Pakistan, but China stood strong with Pakistan, irrespective. So in that sense, a friendship with China, not too sure how far it will be established, but at least in terms of trade, and we could be civil with one another, at least to begin with, and trade could open up, which is what the two countries want. Patikrit Payne, thank you very much for joining us. Patikrit, your take on the SCO summit itself, which is looked at as Asian powers coming together, a counterweight to the West. While India is part of the SCO, India is also part of Quad, which is looked at as a summit that's a counterweight to China. So on two ends, India is dabbling on both boats. Give us a little sense in what this SCO means in layman language. How important is it for India to be on both sides?
Good morning, it's Patikrit Payne. Well, first and foremost, Shanghai Cooperation Organization is primarily a counter-terror, initiative and security, which takes care of security dimensions of various aspects. But over a period of time, Shanghai Cooperation Organization has become some kind of a prelude to the BRICS also, and it is a reality. It's kind of a pivot to Asia concept, and that is there. See, the important aspect of this summit is that the most important aspect we have to remember that there is a necessity of the Asian countries to come together. There are differences. I keep on saying this. There is nothing called a permanent friendship when you talk about major powers in global geopolitics. We are going through a very difficult phase of geopolitical flux. Perhaps had it not been for some of these statements from the Trump administration or some of these actions, this SCO summit would not even have got this kind of focus. But it is a reality. Sometimes, some elements play a role of a catalyst to bring big powers together. See, on the issue of China, I want to make it very clear. It is not a question of having friendship. It is not a question of whether we have sorted out all the issues or not. There are huge problems that we have with China. But at the same time, it has to be understood that both China and India are civilizational nation states, which have survived for 10,000 years, and perhaps they will survive for another 10,000 years. And therefore, it is important for each other to understand each other's concerns. Yes, it is a reality that Pakistan is supported and aided by China, but it is also a reality that India will no more complain about it. When an Operation Sindoor comes, we will deal with it, and we have our own way of telling to the Chinese that we can reach out to the Southeast Asia countries and countries of the South China Sea. We have good relations. We have been arming countries like Philippines and Vietnam. So I believe there is an equilibrium that is reaching when it comes to India and China. Both countries realize that it is a symbiotic relationship. We do have an interdependence on the Chinese on certain critical minerals, on tunnel boring machines, on other things like active pharma ingredients and fertilizers. Similarly, when it comes to China, it is an export-oriented economy, unlike that of India. If their doors are getting shut in the Western hemisphere of the world, they need alternate market. Certainly, Pakistan is not a market for China. It is a kind of a vassal state to contain India, which is there. We will deal with it separately. But I think for them also it is a necessity to realize, and they do realize that they need the Indian market if they have to continue with the momentum of the Chinese growth story.
I want to get straight into that. Pathikrit, why do they need the Indian market? On what levels and which sectors does China need India? Because we know India is also vying to be the world's biggest manufacturing hub, and China has always been that. We've overtaken China in smartphone production, I hear, in first quarter. But that said, we still rely on a lot of raw materials from China. So we need China to give us that raw material, but China certainly is also in itself a massive manufacturing hub.
Well, let me put it this way. Many companies of Europe or United States, even of Japan, look for a China plus one diversification strategy. And therefore, for them, India is an important area for manufacturing. Yes, we are the second largest manufacturer, but we are mostly into assembly. We need to get into component manufacturing. So I think if you look at the recent, statement and report that came up from Niti Aayog, I think what India will do it this way. And I strongly believe it is easier to deal with China because we know there are challenges. We know the no-go areas for China. So when it comes to critical infrastructures, there will not be any Chinese investments allowed. When it comes to other areas which are sensitive in nature, there may not be any Chinese investments. But in non-sensitive sectors, for example, say consumer durables, for example, as India is pushing towards becoming self-sufficient in electronics manufacturing or say renewable energy, you might see, as per the Niti Aayog report, they have advocated for allowing 24% stake in Indian companies' investment from China. So I think if India wants to be a major manufacturing hub, it has to be advocated and told to the Chinese, and the Chinese have to realize that we work as a complement to the Chinese manufacturing proficiency. We cannot come up, and we will not come up as a complete alternative, because that will not happen. So I think that's where the shared interest comes in. Chinese investments in non-sensitive sectors may be allowed in lieu of China assuring resilience of supply chain when it comes to critical minerals, rare earth magnets, tunnel boring machines and fertilizers. And what has happened is this, my last statement, for a long period of time since 1945, the issue has been that if you have to be defined as a developed country, you have to align with the West. We are seeing for the first time not an anti-West, but a non-Western alignment happening among many of the Asian economies. And yes, there will be desperation from the West. There will be challenges. We have our own challenges. But please understand, if the European countries, after having fought for each other for thousands of years, can come together and have a European Union in spite of all the problems. We do have problems with China, but we will have to reach a stage where we understand each other's concern. And I think this visit is not going to solve all the problems, but it is a great opening for exploring issues. And I think China today, before 2020, how the situation was, today understands that India is not a pushover. You cannot do salami slicing from India, and you need to give that space to India, which is in mutual interest for both the countries. Back to you.
Dr. B.R. Deepak, we're looking at border tensions that really was a sore point between India and China all this while. In your sense, the 10-point consensus that India and China has established in the 24th round of talks recently, was any progress, or is it still just status quo? It's just standstill at this point, hasn't moved further, and we're waiting for this talk, the bilateral chat with Xi Jinping that Modi will have in the next few minutes to finally pave the way for advanced talks. I'm not too sure what happened with the last 24th round of talks between India and China militarily.
I think as far as border situation concerned, so we have to forget about the status quo ante which we have been asking for, and that is quite visible, from the kind of buffers we have established with India in Ladakh, especially eastern Ladakh, and some also in southern, Damchok area. And that is, again, visible from some of the statements emanating from our top generals, saying that there is a degree of standoff at certain friction points with China, implying that the situation is not that stable. And secondly is, as far as the question of de-escalation is concerned, that was a recurring theme in Indian statement after 24th round of special representative talks. That it has not happened. That means the troops from the Indian side and the Chinese side, they're still remain at the line of actual control, but that may, ease up perhaps, after this meeting. But I am slightly skeptical because China has been asking India to put a border in its proper place as far as bilateral relations are concerned, and which, of course, we have always countered that as long as border is not stable and tranquil, you cannot diversify relations in other areas.
Correct.
But of course, there is some movement. If you see the statement, of the MEA, there are new mechanisms, confidence-building measures built. 3 new as far as border talks are concerned, 2 under this WMCC. But then again, I think these are at very, very lower position, joint secretary level. It's not the way SR itself was contemplated in 2003 when it was first established, by giving it a political, you can say, push-up from both the countries and wanting to resolve the problem. And I see also it is a very, very problematic, sometimes disturbing, because the kind of early harvest that have been talked about in the statement, that is counter to the political parameters which were signed between the two countries in 2005 during the Chinese Premier Wen Jiabao's India visit. Why I'm saying so? Because ultimately the border has to be resolved through a package deal, and which is exactly the political parameters they talk about. The framework has to be thrashed out, I think, but what is the need of the time is to work out a framework, and then perhaps delimitation of the border on the ground as a package. So that I think is not happening. But this, having said that, I think India and China, especially from the Indian side, so they have come to terms that, okay, so the problems are there, so we perhaps would continue to talk. And it is perhaps the beginning of diversifying, relationship in other areas. But as far as equilibrium, which one of the panelists said that, we are working towards that, I think that is a long haul. I don't think, we would be reaching the kind of equilibrium we had during the 90s or even 2000s. So that I don't think at this point in time. Over to you.
Okay. So you're saying no long-term friendship or business with China is expected through this one meet, but this 40-minute bilateral meeting which the Prime Minister Modi will have now will really pave the way and set the stage for long-term dialogue.
Right,
at least
that
the first move
true,
has already been made. Just to mention to our viewers, Prime Minister Modi has just left his hotel. He's on his way to the SCO summit, and likely that meeting is happening right now with Xi Jinping in few moments from now. So we are tracking this very closely on what's happening there in China. Certainly a lot of developments to come in post that meeting with Xi. We're looking at trade to expand with China. In what sectors will it expand? That, of course, we will have to delve into. But for now, we know that we are largely importing from China and not as much exporting to China. We have a trade deficit of nearly 94 billion, and that India wants to change around. But how India plans to do that, maybe our panelists could give us a little sense. Manish Chand, of course, Indians are very keenly watching this meeting that Xi and Modi will have on the sidelines of SCO summit, because we're looking at alternate supply chains where we want to push whatever business is stuck that we won't be doing with the United States, pushing it to other countries. China is really the most lucrative, considering it's a neighboring nation, but we're not too sure how far we can push our products there as much as we're importing from there. How do we plan to change it?
Yes, so right now the trade imbalance is huge. Trade deficit is around $100 billion, and that's because of the structural asymmetry in Indian and Chinese economy. I mean to say that India doesn't have a well-developed manufacturing sector. Our exports currently to China are primarily raw materials and commodities. That has to change, and that can only happen, if we're talking about this, when we are able to bolster our manufacturing apparatus and capacity. But having said that, we have been working with pressing the Chinese for many years now for enhanced market access to some of the products, some of things we are extremely good at. for example, pharma, for example, IT and IT-enabled services. Many Indian IT companies would like to go there. And so there are some products where we can really score. And this is going to be one of the important issues that will be discussed today during the talks. And also this would be, just as with other tricky issues, if this can be addressed, that can, pave the stage. That is also going to, boost trust between the two countries. Because right now, if you will be amazed, more than $1 trillion from India has gone to China. Because over a decade, that is what the trade deficit looks like. Imagine $1 trillion. So I think the Prime Minister Modi will impress upon the Chinese president that much as we would like to trade, and of course we depend on it. There is a supply chain dependency. And so in that sense, our economic interdependency, dependency in China is so huge that we have to engage with China. We have to build better relations. And it is not just about rare earth magnets and fertilizers, but a whole lot of other things we need from China. And it is not that we cannot get it from other countries, but China provides these at very competitive, affordable prices. If we stop exporting those, the cost will go up, and there will be a ripple effect across the chain. So there is an economic logic. So, the argument was made that some people are arguing that today's meeting and this ongoing rapprochement is dictated by, in a sense, is a response to Trump tariffs, and India is running into the arms of China because it has been mistreated or not by the Americans. No, I think the rapprochement started in Kazan. So there is there is an economic logic that is driving, that will drive the relationship on our part. So how do we export?
In a way, well, it's been a year. You're absolutely right with that. In fact, and that should be reiterated, that this is not only because of Trump tariffs on India and China that the two countries are coming together. A year ago, in October 2024 itself, Putin had a meeting in Kazan where Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping were both present. They exchanged some words. There was an informal invite that was given for Prime Minister Modi to join the SCO summit this time in China. There were feelers, and Modi's team, we hear, responded in a positive. So in that sense, it's been a year since this